If you're going to pursue your dreams, it's better while you're young, at least that's what they say around here, especially for adventurers whose bodies are their tools. And yet there are adults who simply can't give up on their dreams. And that's the case with Rick, a tall, white 32-year-old man who started as an adventurer at 30. He goes to the Adventurers Guild. By chance, the receptionist there is an acquaintance of his named Lisa. They chat for a bit until out of nowhere, a random drunk man starts bothering Lisa, wanting her to accompany him somewhere. And then Rick ends up handling the situation, acting as a peacemaker. He touches the stomach region of the man's armor and the guy simply passes out of nowhere. The fellow even drools there. Rick says the guy must be drunk. And then the young woman gives Rick his card for the Adventurers Guild Rank E test. Afterwards, they notice a papaya mark on the steel armor of the guy who was supposedly drunk, right where Rick touched. The said guy was once a Rank A adventurer named Damond, and he is wanted for assault. Rick goes to his test, placing his hand on a crystal that measures a person's magical energy level. Unlike others who have rank C or D, Rick has rank F-, a very low level, and everyone starts making fun of him. The first task of the test is to deliver a single blow to a slime bag. This will measure the force of that blow. Everyone delivers their blows and they are very strong, but the slime bag remains intact. When it's Rick's turn, the evaluator comes and advises him to give up, given his age, which is considered too advanced for him to perform well. But he goes anyway. Rick remembers his heavy adventure training. He uses all the indignation from the prejudice and mockery he suffers from others, and channels it all into the strength for the blow. He breaks the bank with such a powerful punch that it rips the entire slime bag, scattering slime everywhere. This surprises everyone. Afterwards, he defended against a 5th nature spell with a 1st nature spell. The guy is really tough. The defensive damage was so great that a first-class knight named Sylvester Elzernia had to go there to see what was happening. Pulls Rick's file and sees that he worked for 14 years as a receptionist at the Tiger Guild branch. During the test break, Rick talks to a friend named Rionette. He talks about his test. At that moment, he's approached by Fred, a snobby little boy from his class who thought he would beat him in the defensive magic test. The spoiled brat gets so frustrated that he starts crying. His older sister named Angelica appears to comfort him, and she even scolds Rick for making her brother cry. The boy keeps saying that 40-year-old man made him cry, and our protagonist gets angry and emphasizes that he is only 32 years old. Angelica challenges Rick to a duel. Notably, she's a second-class knight of the Kingdom's Knights, which is equivalent to a rank B adventurer. Yeah, let's just say Rick will need a lot of luck against her. Rionette gives him moral support, reminding him that he is part of a group that prides itself on being the strongest on the continent. And this group is called the Orichalcum Fist. He becomes more willing and goes to the duel. The girl draws her sword and uses a super-fast speed ability called Instant Step, passing her sword around him just to see what his reaction would be. Rick visualized everything as if it were in slow motion. She boasts about him being so paralyzed and silent. Then she trips over a rock, catching Rick by surprise, who dodges her with much more difficulty, as he needs to retreat successively while she tumbles. He didn't realize it was accidental, and he thinks she did it on purpose. He finds her ability incredible, and with that she becomes very embarrassed with herself and decides to pretend it was on purpose. Then she tries again 3 times faster than before, but he still manages to dodge. She's not satisfied and tries again, thinking that this succession of runs will help. But she trips again, sliding across the floor towards him. Then he thinks it's a low attack she's trying to make, so he prepares to throw a low punch. He narrowly misses Angelica, creating a huge hole in the ground. She's now terrified because she almost had her head smashed by the guy. He thinks everything was intentional and is impressed by her agility. Now he's going to try his best, as if everything he's done so far wasn't enough to make the devil himself run away. After almost being practically a victim of homicide, she decides to give up with all that snobby pose, as if she were letting him go. Her brother is disappointed and Rick is surprised. She's just forgetting one thing. She had told him that if she lost, she would be his vassal until death, and he decided to choose the same thing for her. Seeing that she was screwed, she can't do anything but run away, running faster than all the speeds she used in the duel itself. Who knows, maybe now she won't hit someone without seeming like she's in slow motion, right? After all that, the results of the preliminary tests are announced. The next day, all those who passed will participate in the second test, which is a simulated battle. Our dear Rick, Gladiator number 4242, is very anxious, wondering if he passed or not. And he passed. This is because of Rionette, his best friend, for whom he seems to have a certain crush. Out of nowhere, exhaling a very strong and unpleasant scent of cologne, a snobby rich kid appears, hitting on Rionette right in front of Rick. He introduces himself as the eldest son of the noble house of Diamuit, who rules the people in the northern lands. Then he asks her to introduce herself. She's very naive and does so. And Rick also introduces himself as if the guy had noticed his existence. To vary, Rick has to listen to another joke from this jerk playboy. Although Rionette shows no interest in the rude guy, he says he wants to take her as his second wife. Seeing all this situation, Rick intervenes, pretending that he is her boyfriend. The guy tries to make fun of him, not believing it. And on top of that, by seeing his test card, unlike Rick, he is rank A and is the examiner of the second test. Senseless, the guy still asks Rionette to dinner with him, which ends up taking Rick by surprise. She buys his idea to ward off the inconvenient guy, confirming that she is Rick's girlfriend. All this while hugging a muscular guy. And she ends up touching her attributes to his arm, if you know what I mean. Then she tells the guy to his face that his smell is bad, and Rick asks the guy if that smell comes from him. The guy gets angry and tells him to prepare for the test, and after that he leaves parading all annoyed. She doesn't care and says she even liked it because it freed her from the playboy. To Rick's delight, he ends up with a guy named Lynx Lori, who introduces himself as the examiner for the second test. That is, it won't be a useless person there, right? The guy says he is surprised by Rick's trajectory due to his age. He also has an advanced age, but Rick, like, the guy is 40 years old, right? And he thinks his determination is very cool. He started as an adventurer at 24. Then he says goodbye to Rick with great enthusiasm, and Rick is happy to have inspired someone. However, who appears in Lorite's path is none other than Raster the Armuite, the annoying playboy who is secretly watching everything. After crossing paths with the guy, he disappears and informs the school that he suddenly fell ill, and the examiner becomes Raster. Yet our protagonist's joy was short-lived. Rionette realizes that by his last name this means that the two she met the day before, Fred and Angelica, must be his relative, and now it's over, right? The others are also worried, because he is someone who reached rank A at 17 years old. Rionette continues to praise Rick. Suddenly a person with a black hooded robe appears, saying they can read fortunes through a crystal ball, and says that this service is free. Rick gets excited and agrees to have his fortune read by a mysterious person whose face is hidden. When he goes to sit in the front chair, a spell is visible on it, which teleports him to another place, disappearing from their sight. That's when Rionette becomes alert, and the figure finally reveals himself. It's that little person, Fred, Angelica's younger brother. Rionette holds him by the neck and asks where Rick went. At first he refuses to say and acts cute, but she threatens to use all her power to poke his eye out. Then he finally says that teleportation magic is of the highest level of difficulty, so even for a genius like him, 100 meters is the limit of range. Meanwhile, Rick finds himself in an outdoor area that he identifies as part of the back of the place in the test, but he realizes that he is surrounded by personal guards of the Armuite family. And out of nowhere, a group of people who seem to have come to save Rick also appear there. One of them is a very large orc. He asks what he is doing there and if he has a test to take. Rick disguises, saying that he was just training for a test. And for some reason, he asks the guards who until recently were going to do something bad to him, precisely for them to run away from the orc. And of course they don't do that and charge at the orc. One of the guards throws his sword at the orc and it breaks into pieces. Instead of wanting to retaliate, the orc just analyzes the subject's fighting performance. The guy doesn't understand anything and tries to punch him. The orc defends himself by holding his hand and squeezing it until it is shattered. But then, he himself uses healing magic to heal his hand and analyze his punch, as if he were a teacher training a student. One of the other members speaks to Rick in a friendly way, saying that he will put a peaceful end to all this. But then he pulls out a rifle loaded with magic stones and starts shooting at the guys. A very small girl, who is another member of the group, is cornered by other guards who threaten her with a machete in front of her throat. She shows naivety, asking the others what he is doing, and they answer that he just wants to play with her. She asks her executioner if that's what he really wants, and he hurts her in response, and that's when she loses her head and casts a 7th nature magic, blowing everything up. The leader of the guards recognizes all of them. She is a vampire mage, the most powerful prodigy, the demon child of devastation. Her name is Alice. The shooter there is a half-elf and half-dwarf who looks young but is 50 years old. He is the greatest weapon craftsman in the world, named Myzete. The orc has equivalent physical strength and intelligence, and his name is Brogstone Orc. They are rank S adventurers, and they are precisely the group known as the Orichalcum Fist. Oh, and by the way, Lorite is alive and managed to reach Rick, telling him everything that happened. Raster locked him in a cell just because Lorite has the dream of creating a school for children who want to be adventurers. And Rick sees a big problem in someone of the 3rd category wanting to build a school to teach people who, being analyzed by someone like him, will also end up being of the 3rd category. After that, we are shown that there are 4 great foundations. There is physical strength, body control, mana quantity, and magic control. Together they influence an adventurer's strength. There are adventurers who can visualize the scores of the 4 great foundations of other people. When he visualizes the examiner's scores, he sees that they are very high in mana quantity and magic control. If he looks at someone with a very strong score for too long, his eyes start to burn. And that's what happens at this moment. Then he sees Rick entering the arena. After he finds his presence there strange, he visualizes the man's scores. His eyes hurt so much that he rolls on the ground. Then he duels with Raster, who is surprised that he survived his guards. He hopes Rick doesn't think he's like his guards because they are just commoners, and he is a noble and a genius. Rick holds back from being consumed by anger, remembering Rionette's teachings, who is also part of the Orichalcum Fist. Then Raster launches a fire blast at Rick, a 3rd nature magic called Illuminated Flame. Rick remains intact. Among the 4 great foundations, mana quantity must be developed while young. More precisely, before the person turns 20, or there is no hope of growth. Since Rick became an adventurer at 30, his mana quantity is extremely low. Therefore, he had to develop his body a lot. Orarch tells Lisa, Rick's friend, that he made Rick run with 100 kg weights on his feet. And he ran from carnivorous creatures in the forest, all this to compensate for the lack of mana quantity. He had to train exhaustively in 3 other areas. Orarch trained his physical strength, Rionette his body control, Myzete his magic control, and Alice, well, she just played magic with him. The truth is, because of this he became rank S, but he doesn't know it. Meanwhile, in the arena, Raster throws several stones at Rick with magic, and also crushes him with 2 large rocks. But he comes out intact. Raster uses a 3rd nature composite magic called Flame Elimination. Rick manages to raise his hand and defy the magic and make it disappear. Thanks to Mizit's teachings, he achieved this feat, and then Raster tries another blow the instant step. Since Rick sees this in slow motion, he defends himself with a punch to Raster, who manages to perceive this in time to use iron body magic to cushion the impact of the punch. And then Raster asks how he managed to get so strong in just 2 years. Well, Rick went through a series of insane training sessions with his Orichalcum Fist instructors. He was trapped in a dragon's lair until he managed to defeat it. He also went through a succession of explosions. He swam through monster-capturing fluid until he drowned. Anyway, just simple things. Lisa is amazed and asks if he wouldn't have died doing those things. And Orc confirms that yes, he has died several times in training, but with his healing magic he managed to bring him back. He thought that going to the limits, even to death if necessary, made him much stronger. Raster doesn't believe much in these stories, and asks what his motivations would be to go through all this. Our protagonist says that it is to defeat the strongest monster in the world, called Kaiser, and the Armuites laugh at the situation, not believing what they saw. Turns out that this monster is the greatest of the monsters that appears in the legend of the hero Yamato, who incidentally is also considered a legend. Lisa knows this and tries to confirm with the Orichalcum Fist group, asking if this information is correct, and Oric also confirms that this is the group's ultimate goal. Raster resorts to ignorance and uses a 7th nature composite magic called Forest Rope. The ropes begin to come out of the earth and trap Rick. Then Raster performs an 8th nature composite magic, which turns the guy into a giant monster made of branches. But Rick, with a basic direct punch magic called Air Shot, used millions of times by him in training, deflects the punch of Raster's 8th nature magic, defeating his opponent triumphantly. Everyone congratulates Rick on his incredible feat, and after all this they announce those who passed the test for rank A, and Rick's number still hasn't been called. He becomes thoughtful as he waits for his number to be called, and he remembers when he was a receptionist next to Alyssa. Once monsters were appearing frequently in the city, he thought a mission would be announced soon. He leaves his lair and goes to the city. Most are low-level monsters, so he thinks it will be a rank D mission. A friend of Rick's named Zaid passes by the reception, and he informs that he has been promoted to rank B. A certain envy is evident on Rick's face. He gets a little frustrated doing the same thing at work for 14 years, but he doesn't have much to complain about. He has a stable life and income. Out of nowhere on that day he hears a cry for help from someone. A medium-level monster is at the location, and a young woman walks down the street and Rick tries to protect her. It turns out she is an adventurer. And not just anyone, she is rank S, that is, a first-class adventurer. She asks him to step away and cuts the monster into several parts, and thanks him for saving her. She is none other than Rionette. She's very sincere and says that, considering that a certain amount of mana is necessary to be an adventurer, and that it is impossible to obtain after 20, she says that there is no possibility of him succeeding, and apologizes for being so sincere and upfront. Right? He says it's no problem and that at least he met someone very nice. And he even awkwardly invites her out. She accepts immediately, leaving Rick looking silly. From that day on he keeps smiling broadly at the idea of Rionette being his future girlfriend, but the joy is short-lived because monsters reappear in the city. Rionette is there to deal with all of them, tearing apart more monsters. At one point she has some vision and is paralyzed. Rick notices and gets worried. The guild set up an urgent mission and other adventurers begin to appear to face the monsters, including Zaid. He tries to reassure Rionette, talking about the others, but she says that this will not be enough. She explains that very close by there is a dragon, and when she feels a dragon's magic she loses control of the magic within her own body. And sure enough, the dragon appears. He makes everyone fall with a gust of wind. Then he creates magical barriers around them. Rick puts himself in front of everyone, wanting to do something against the dragon. He thinks if he dies, at least he will die as an adventurer. So he throws a stone at the dragon and it has no effect. The other adventurers take the opportunity to go ahead and launch spells against the dragon, but nothing works. It's as if they were insignificant to the dragon. Rick goes to the dragon and it steps on him with its giant paw. Everyone is surprised by what they saw. But for some reason, while this happens, Rick gained an ability. From then on he carries the dragon with his own hands and throws it. The mana that surrounds his body is very strong, and then the dragon spits a powerful blast at Rick, and he creates a barrier and manages with it to make the dragon's power return against itself. In this, the dragon becomes headless, like literally, and is defeated. Rick faints and only wakes up a week later in the hospital bed with Rionette by his side. She invites him to be part of the Orichalcum Fist, and that's how the relationship between Rick and Rionette began. Returning to the present after waiting so long for his number, he was finally called and passed the test. Laureate was in the hospital but is discharged, so he goes to visit Rick in the castle where he lives with the Orichalcum Fist group. He goes there and upon arriving is well received by Rick. Laureate meets each member of the group, Alice with her mischief, Mizit building his weapons in the outdoor area, Brogstone reading a book in his gigantic library, and he is impressed with the place. He asks Brogstone to teach him something. The orc sees in him the brilliance that comes from Rick, and makes him do the same training he did with Rick, like running with weights on his feet. Laureate suffers but then participates in a wonderful banquet with the group, and in this he perceives some feeling Rick has for Rionette. He even tries to talk about it, but Rick dodges, saying he's too old for her. Laureate sees no problem with this since he himself is 20 years older than his wife. He advises Rick to take more initiatives to help Rionette with her daily tasks so that they can become closer, and Rick thinks it's a good idea and immediately goes to her. After he leaves, Lorate talks to Brogstone about him, remembering that Rick has an innate ability. Brogstone explains that his ability is the type that is activated by certain conditions, and Myzik compliments, it would have been better if it were the type that was always active or activated voluntarily. And Brogstone explains that if his ability activates the Reckless Soul, he will surpass even everyone in the group. He asks if Lorate has ever heard of the magic stones known as the 6 jewels. Lorate recognizes this from Yamato's legend. The 6 jewels are magic stones that open the portal to the spirit of origin, right where Kaiser, whom they intend to defeat, sleeps, and they are activated every 200 years. Then he comes back and asks him if he doesn't know any information there at the Central that is related to this. Lorate replies that he is not aware of anything at the moment, but that he will try to find something in the confidential department. After all this, the group takes a mission with the guild, which involves discovering a nest of wyverns, which are creatures that look like dragons. At the bottom of their nest, they capture one of the 6 jewels called the Crimson Flower. It contains an absurd amount of magic. Using the resonance of this magic, they are able to find the remaining jewels. Myzik casts a 6 nature composite magic called Earth Mapping. With this, they visualize the map of a large, highly developed city. Brogstone thinks it's Orichalcum, a country where combat arts thrive and are famous for its Colosseum. Then we go back 400 years. This place was a small country composed mainly of desert. The 4th king, named Alexander, saw a settlement and built the Colosseum. There he held fighting competitions, and the king himself fought without weapons, only with his own body. He reigned as the undefeated champion of 10,000 fights. People came from various continents to see him, and that's how the kingdom of Orichalcum emerged. In Orichalcum, being a fighter is a popular occupation. They are called pugilists. Rick gives his colleagues the idea of going to the city hall to see if they can get information about the 6 jewels there, and Brogstone accepts. Near them, a man is bothering a woman. Brogstone goes there and intervenes, punching the man in the face, which makes his face bleed. Then he shows them the jewels he has and asks the guy named Gold and the girl named Militia if they have seen anything similar in the kingdom. They are interrupted by the parade announcing the King of Fists tournament. Rionette asks them what that is, and Gold replies that it is a fighting tournament to determine the champion of the pugilists, and he's even a little surprised that she doesn't know, right? One day Gold wants to be like Kelvin, the tournament champion 5 times, who is passing by the parade now being acclaimed. Militia notices something on Kelvin's champion belt. He has a beautiful stone similar to the ones they showed her, and Brogstone recognizes it is one of the 6 jewels, and it is called the Sovereign's Gold. They go to Kelvin and Rick tries to talk to him, but he beats around the bush. Brogstone arrives and goes straight to the point. He wants the jewel that is on his belt, and he explains that this jewel belonged to a member of their group a long time ago. He has been looking for it for several years, and of course they will return the belt after replacing the jewel with one of equivalent value. Kelvin's boss asks to expel them from there, but Kelvin says it's okay and that he believes them. There's only one problem: he can't give them the belt. It's special to everyone in Orichalcum, and there's only one way to get that jewel, which is to be at the top of the Fist tournament. Brogstone accepts the challenge and they leave, and Kelvin comments to his boss that he felt they are very, very strong. To enter the tournament, you have to pass the preliminaries held in the east and west of the kingdom, and you have to win within the blocks that qualified. Rick goes to his test, and it's a simulated physical battle. His opponent is randomly chosen among the new pugilists. Then Rick asks if his opponent is strong, and the responsible examiner says that she is a promising rookie who won all the preliminary fights of the tournament. To his surprise, his opponent is none other than Angelica, Raster's sister. She drops her jaw when she sees him and the test begins. Then she prepares to take an instant step, but before she had time for that, she suffers a sweep kick to the legs that makes her fall. Then she gets up and tries again, and Puff fell again. And Rick explains that continuous sweep kicks to the legs are a technique that demoralizes the opponent and also doesn't hurt much. She gets frustrated but says it's nothing to her. And now he's going to try to fight for real. With that, she gets scared and asks to give up, and Rick gets embarrassed. After the fight, she approaches Rick in the corridors, crying and asking him if he doesn't get tired of humiliating her. To make up for everything, he pays for her dinner. After that, he goes to his first preliminary fight. He fights a guy named Gritch Albert, who's using a magic stone called an impact stone, which increases the strength of his blows by 20 or 30 times. He throws a punch that generates smoke that makes Rick disappear from his sight. Gritch declares himself the winner and acts all cocky until he realizes that his arm is broken. Then he takes a look, Rick is intact, and tells him that using this without first strengthening the body will probably break his bones. Well, now it's his turn. He punches next to Gritch's head, causing the force of the punch's impact to shake his brain and cause unconsciousness, even without touching the guy. The guy falls unconscious and Rick is the winner. Angelica also passes the preliminaries, having 40 consecutive victories. The girl is really good, you know, just not a match for Rick. He also wants to make 40 victories in nothing more, nothing less than 4 days. She doesn't understand how this is possible, and thinks that perhaps he aims for this because he doesn't know the area that much. There are dozens of places for the preliminary, and it's impossible to go to each one in so little time since they are kilometers away from each other. He ignores and goes straight to the fight, and on foot no less. Angelica gets frustrated and asks how he can challenge common sense so much. He runs at full speed as if he were the Flash. Rionette asks if Angelica wants to watch his fight. She says she would, so Rionette picks her up and carries her, jumping from rooftop to rooftop, going there and making the girl faint halfway. Rick manages to win 40 disputes to pass the preliminaries. Angelica realizes that Renette is very close to Rick, and asks if she hates the thought that they might have a relationship. Renette says she doesn't care about that because she has a great affection for him. Then Rick bumps into Snape, the president of the West League Management Committee, a man who looks like a talking humanoid reptile. He comes to congratulate Rick for having the fastest passage through the West League qualifier. Snape says he is a merchant and that his company entered someone in this competition, which is very suspicious. And as he says goodbye to Rick, he asks him to give his regards to Angelica and ask her not to overdo it. And then Rick learns that Snape is the main sponsor of this year's competition. Angelica gets jealous as she notices that Rick looks at Renette more than at her. And Rick and she continue participating in the fights, winning all of them. Angelica becomes different, more aggressive and cold, until when trying to take an instant step her opponent manages to dodge her blow. She is hit hard and ends up losing a fight. After being treated and discharged, Rick goes after her and asks why she used blows that did not favor her. She tries to avoid talking to him until she surrenders. Then she stops to talk to him and says that it turns out that Snape is her fiancé. Snape intervened in a series of problems that the Armuite house went through. Her parents died in an accident. Thus she and her siblings took over the management of the Diamuite lands. But they were inexperienced and fell into serious financial difficulties. That's when her grandfather came and made an agreement with Snape. Then Snape was looking to create ties with nobles and members of royalty. So he promised to give a lot of money to the Diamuite house, in exchange for Angelica being his fiancée. After that, they rebuilt their finances, but it was too late to annul the engagement. Angelica took a look at the assets of the Dragonaut Company and saw that they have almost nothing. So he intends to win the amount through the tournament, but she thinks he cannot use the sponsor spot to manipulate the tournament. Her goal is to defeat the competitor to be able to cancel this engagement. Problem is that her biggest competitor will be Gate, Snape's younger brother, and it won't be easy to defeat him. She thinks she won't succeed, and Rick proposes to be her trainer. In this he begins Angelica's training, and he starts in a very peculiar way. He ties 30 kg balls to her and with a rope tied to her belly Rick runs at full speed, forcing the poor thing to run along at the same speed as him. Poor thing almost died, man. She asks him to stop, but he continues to push her to her limit. After making his student almost kick the bucket from exhaustion, he's fine with everything, as he's used to intense training where he died several times and was then resurrected. Poor girl, you know. Then he gives a small break for lunch for them to continue later. She takes advantage of the break and runs away. 15 minutes after she fled to preserve her mental health, eating in peace, our crazy Rick appears. He says he had been looking for her for a while throughout the kingdom. And contrary to what she thinks, he won't scold her because he understands her. He himself tried to escape his training many times, but then he thought that between his regrets after giving up and his current suffering, which one could she bear more easily? This was like a balance that she had to analyze and see which element weighs more in her heart. She says she wants to contribute to her family as a fighter and not as someone from the nobility, which is what she was raised to be. She wants to be the first special class knight, and decides that she will bear the current suffering more easily and continues her training. Rick realizes that she fights better with her swords, but the tournament is of course without any weapons, so he invited someone to teach Angelica to use her own hands as if they were swords, and that is precisely Renette. After the training, Angelica is more aggressive than ever, even too aggressive. Well, at least she's winning the matches. Upon returning to the tournament, the pairs for the duels are announced. Angelica realizes that the distribution of pairs means that Gate never fights against Kelvin or Brogstone, and she believes that this was manipulated to influence the final result. She believes that when the time is right and the probabilities are higher, Snape will make a bet. And Rick understands the reasoning. If Gate loses the fight on purpose, they will win a lot of money. Angelica confirms, emphasizing that this is why his opponents cannot be too strong. She will face him in the second round, so she will take the opportunity to make sure she destroys his plans at that time. Then everyone goes to watch Gate's fight. His opponent is Eumann Mueller. He throws several punches at his body, but it's as if they have no effect. With just one big punch, Gate breaks the guy and leaves him in a coma. Angelica feels something strange about him. And Rick too. For someone who seems to have an awkward posture, Gate fights even too well. In Kelvin's fight, Myzete feels as if he lets himself be hit, but then he knocks out his opponent. Then at that moment, Rick ends up hearing, coming from some benches behind, one of Rick's trainers commenting to the other that he is a bit irregular. Then Snape sits next to Rick to get a better view of the next fight, which is between his brother Gate and his fiancée Angelica. Before the fight, Gate mocks her for her training so hard to be strong and him being much stronger than her even without training. In this, she gets angry with him. When the fight comes, she kicks him in the stomach. And I'll tell you, the guy doesn't even move and retaliates with a punch that she dodges, and also takes the opportunity to give another kick. In this, he uses some force with his hand, which greatly resembles Jedi power, and then she goes back with force. But she puts her foot on the ground to slide and slow down the impact. She undoes her strengthening magic. Now no one understands what she is trying to do. In this, she invokes a magic called Magic Flow Reverse Reflection. Gate laughs, not understanding anything. Adding an instant step, she gives him a thread cut with her hand, and that makes the big guy bleed in the stomach. Yeah, it seems Renette's teachings are taking effect. Gate gets angry and punches towards her, but she manages to dodge the punch, throwing her body back. Then she jumps back and gives him another cut. Then he punches the ground, raising a lot of dust. When the dust clears, he is right behind Angelica and punches her, sending her back to the arena walls. Gate apologizes to Snape. He knows he has to go easy on her because she is his brother's fiancée, but he couldn't resist. Then she takes the instant step, but the red lizard hits her with its tail, sending her back. She tries once more to use the instant step, and this time Gate manages to copy the movement from seeing Angelica do it so much. He runs alongside her at the same speed. Then he hits her, sending her flying away once more. While watching the match, Snape tells Rick that he met Gate, his adopted brother, when he was 8 years old. He hit him so hard during a fight that he couldn't stand up. That's what made Snape retire. Gate provokes Angelica, speaking in a mocking way about her parents because they must be trash to generate a daughter who is so trash, and reveals to Rick that he knows what Angelica thinks of him about the supposed parental manipulation scheme but says that this is not true, and Rick pretends not to understand. In the arena, Gate beats Angelica without mercy or pity. She still shows a desire to fight, even barely standing. He grabs Angelica by the hair and throws her against the arena wall. In the stands, Rick sees that things are getting ugly. When Snape is digging his claws into her when she is stuck in the wall, almost killing the poor thing, Rick intervenes and throws something at him, which makes Gate miss his target, digging his claws into the wall. He wins the match and Angelica is taken to the infirmary to be cared for by the doctors. Gate was filled with hatred for someone having disrupted his fatal attack. He knows it was Rick. He goes to him through the arena's internal corridors. He tries to kick Rick while he puts on his boot, but Rick tells him not to rush because he will beat him outside. At least Angelica is doing well and is not in danger, receiving Brogstone's healing power. Upon leaving treatment, she crosses paths with Rick and asks his forgiveness for not having won the tournament, considering all the training and lost time. She just wanted to be independent and pursue her dreams, proving her potential. But on second thought, marrying Snape might not be so bad after all, and probably she won't even have to work. And Rick says that it's all his fault because he underestimated Gate's strength. Returning to the arena, now it's Rick's turn to fight Gate. The redhead keeps provoking Rick, sarcastically apologizing for not having been able to kill Angelica. And Rick immediately gives him a very strong punch. Then when Gate tries to retaliate, Rick touches his body, activating something. It's a body control technique called penetrating attack, where the force of the blow doesn't hit the outside of the body but the inside. Despite the pain, Gate continues to use a strengthening magic which is typical of Dragonoids called Dragon Force. He hits Rick and sends him back. But he uses his feet to support himself on the arena wall, gaining momentum, launching himself back into the arena, running from Gate. In this, Gate uses something similar to the instant step and catches up with Rick. Rick brakes sharply for Gate to pass him and stay at a distance, which allows him to attack him. But Gate notices and dodges, making Rick fall. Then Rick runs to him and tries to give a strong push with his hand. Gate activates the iron body power, making Rick's attack useless. Then Gate pushes him, goes behind him and gives a strong blow to the head, which makes Rick roll on the ground. Gate is perplexed to see that Rick is not bleeding. Renette explains to Angelica that this is one of the body control techniques called fluid strikes, which disperses attacks within the body. This means that Rick is not suffering damage. One detail is that in this fight he restricted his abilities to match Angelica's level. Brogstone tells Angelica that he is doing this so that she realizes her potential. Rick begins to use several successive instant step movements, the equivalent of what Angelica would be able to do training for another year. He throws a punch that catches Gate off guard. Gate can barely see Rick, he's so fast. When Rick stops, Gate runs towards him. Then Rick uses the thread cut and defeats Gate, tearing the redhead. And in this he won the fight. Snape needed Gate to win this match. But deep down, he was glad to see Gate defeated since he ruined Snape's career as a pugilist. Still, he found it a shame not to have Angelica as his wife. Without raising the money to fulfill the contract, the engagement needs to be annulled. In the tournament arena, now it's time for a new fight. Brogstone against Kelvin. And the little guy doesn't waste time and immediately unleashes a series of punches on Brogstone's body, who just stands there motionless, just waiting for him to finish to deliver a punch that sends Kelvin flying. But he manages to make a good landing on the ground. Out of nowhere, the battle is interrupted. From inside one of the arena walls, Gate emerges out of control, wanting to kill anyone who stood in his way. He attacks the spectators in the stand. And Kelvin goes there and challenges the monster to a fight, knocking out the redhead. After that, our heroes go to eat a bit while the injured people are being rescued. Angelica asks Renette, "Where's Rick?" She says he went for a run to Claristia territory. He must be near the kingdom's borders training. By coincidence, she finds Kelvin, who is also training and wanting to be alone. Yeah, it seems his moment was interrupted by Rick. Anyway, he takes a look with a mischievous gaze and thinks, at least he can be a training partner. Then he starts hitting Rick. The guy is really crazy. Rick retaliates but is impressed by how quickly Kelvin defends himself. He finds it strange that someone with such good reflexes was hit at that moment in a tournament. And then Kelvin tells a little of his story. He grew up in the slums, and fighting was the thing that amused him the most. But there came a time when there was nothing left that he could call a fight. When he arrived in Orichalcum, at first it was good. He became a great champion in the tournaments. But there came a time when he got tired of just winning. One day he accidentally overheard from behind a door a conversation between his boss and someone, saying that the fights no longer had as many spectators. He attributes this to the fact that he had many fights and that they ended with only a knockout punch. Boss didn't care much about these statistics. What has to be will be. But that's when Rick's idea of losing some fights on purpose came up. Back to the fight, Kelvin is eager to continue. He He throws a punch called Flying Fang at Brogstone, but he calmly defends himself with one arm. Then Kelvin starts throwing successive very fast punches, and Brogstone dodges all of them. Then he defends himself with only one arm and punches with the other. Kelvin dodges, going to one side and moving away. From where he is, Kelvin tells Brogstone that he is impressed with his strength. He, on the other hand, says that Kelvin hasn't changed at all since the day before. He says that if anything, he is relaxing in the fight. He heard that Kelvin is a professional pugilist. There's something fishy here. He notices that, and then he discovers Kelvin's deception of intentionally limiting his strength while fighting. And then Kelvin admits it. Brogstone says he finds his gesture understandable since he prioritizes the audience, and therefore in this case he will fight them using only 2 fingers and without moving from his spot. Kelvin accepts and throws several punches at him, followed by a supreme punch called Flying Fang. Well, Brogstone manages to dodge all the punches, and holds the guy's wrist with 2 of his fingers. Then he spins him around and throws him to the ground. Kelvin is realizing that his opponent is trying to take it easy, but still pressing him to make it a good fight. He can't take it anymore, he wants to fight for real, giving his best. This chance to fight someone so powerful cannot be wasted. Out of nowhere, his boss gets up from his seat and argues with him. He is realizing that Kelvin is not using his full potential, and demands that he stop because he wants to see everything he trained to be, and that he not worry about his business. And Kelvin is overjoyed and surrenders to his will. From now on he's going all out. He immediately throws a violent punch at Brogstone, but he defends himself with one hand calmly without moving. But wait, now he's really using all 5 fingers. That might say something. Kelvin kicks Brogstone in the stomach, but he takes the opportunity to grab his leg and throw him towards the arena wall. Before hitting the wall, Kelvin activates the iron body power and manages to avoid the strong impact. The audience notices the difference in Kelvin's performance, and it becomes evident that he has improved too much for their taste. Everyone is frustrated with his deception. Well, he doesn't let it get him down because now it's too late. He continues the fight, sending nothing less than only a 5th nature composite magic called Flame Wave. While watching, Angelica says that the people Kelvin belongs to are not usually good with composite nature magic, and Rick says that he must have trained for years. With his feet on the ground, Brogstone manages to pull a piece of the soil and use it as a shield, making the fire deflect from him and towards the audience. But with the power he uses on the stone, he creates a force field that prevents the advance of the fire. Then he breaks the burned stone. Then Kelvin uses an 8th nature composite magic called Angel's Tear, which takes over the entire place. It looks like a nuclear bomb about to explode. Poor audience who is also there, right? Even Rick gets scared. But Brogstone manages to free himself from the branches, and with just a normal punch towards Kelvin's magic, he destroys the whole thing with brute force alone. He looks at Kelvin and gives a sign of approval, which in orc tradition means that he will now attack. Kelvin sent several spells towards the orc and he doesn't even suffer a scratch. Arriving there, he hits him squarely, using a mixture of several blows that only Rick is able to see. Anyone else could be dead now, but not Kelvin. He still has energy to go there and deliver several punches to the orc until he is almost completely exhausted. The audience goes wild, cheering for him to their own surprise. When attempting a final blow that mixes instant step with strong fist, in addition to the rolling fang surrounded by flame sword, he hits Brogstone, moving him only a few centimeters. I think fighting a rock would be less embarrassing, you know. This ends up making Kelvin spend all his energy, and Brogstone congratulates him on the excellent fight and delivers a definitive punch to him which knocks him out. Now Rick must fight Brogstone, and just thinking about it he gets completely terrified to the point of his hair falling out. Meanwhile, Kelvin is recovering in bed, and the children are outside playing and impersonating him. Brogstone appears visiting him. He asks how the injury is, and he replies, "It's fine." He offers to heal him, but he says he doesn't want to because he needs to feel this pain since he hasn't felt anything real for a long time. Meanwhile, Angelica tells Rick that even if he dies in the fight, he can be resurrected later. But even so, he says that dying is very bad. For the first time, the man is wetting his pants. Mizet reveals to Rick that Snape's goal in training him, in addition to having allies to help defeat Kaiser, was to be someone he could fight on equal terms with. When they go to eat, Mizet explains to Angelica that he was surprised that Rick didn't go crazy in his training with Brogstone. Alice blurts out that Rick has an innate ability, and Angelica, surprised, says she didn't know that. Mizet says that the condition to activate it is a bit complicated. His strength cannot be controlled. This causes serious damage to his body. Rionette tries to talk to him. He asks her if she finds him pathetic. She says no, but that she likes Rick more, who even scared would fight for Brogstone's sake. Well, it seems our dear Rick is going to fight even if he is very hesitant. The announcer announces the prizes, and the prize for the winner is 300 million luck, and as an extra prize 100 kg of Restenate magic stones. Also a golden slime punching bag and a pair of tickets for a trip to the hot springs. And then Rionette goes there and says something in Rick's ear. And in this she realizes that he has overcome the tension he was feeling. He starts the fight with a violent instant step which makes the arena tremble. On top of that, with a thread cut to the orc's belly. He throws several punches at the orc, who defends himself with his arm. But the force of Rick's punch is so great that it makes everything tremble. And Brogstone's protective energy field becomes increasingly necessary so that the audience does not suffer collateral accident. Rick manages to make another thread cut, taking advantage of an orc's punch which he managed to dodge. Angelica sees that he is motivated and asks what Rionette said to him at that moment. She says she asked him to take her for the hot springs trip. The guy is a simp. This motivated the guy to be with the redhead. The two alone in the leisure place, Brogstone stops just defending and also attacks with a punch that Rick manages to dodge. Kelvin says that this punch has much more power than fifth nature composite magic. Rick gets scared and he starts dodging several consecutive blows from the orc using a recitation magic. He dampens the impact using the learnings he had with Myzete and Alice. He uses the fluid strike. The orc defends and punches him, which sends him flying. But with a magic, he slows down the force of the impact and uses one of the stones that detach from the ground with the force of the magic to gain momentum and hit the orc head-on. Brogstone launches an air power, and Rick uses his feet to make a magic to cushion the impact and also gains momentum from the air wave, making a sphere of magic, launching it towards the orc. Brogstone is impressed and praises Rick for his talent. He says that now Rick is a true member of the group, and that this is an opportunity to talk about the past, about how the Orichalcum Fist came about. In childhood, Brogstone differed from other orcs by his ability to think. He was interested in books left by humans, and he began to understand their letters and culture to the point of giving himself an individual name imitating humans, and then he called himself Brogstone. Orcs understood each other through blows, but perhaps because he was too strong, he felt nothing from them. So he made fire, built a dwelling for them and taught them to communicate in new ways. Over time, he came to be treated as God, until no one else approached him, not even his family. He felt increasingly alone. One day, during a storm, his parents died. He had strayed a little from the herd, and when he returned, they were dead. He felt nothing now that he was truly alone. One day, a man crossed his path and he realized that the orc spoke and read. This made the man interested in the orc. He had a request for him to get rid of the orc, but he ended up becoming his friend. The man fought alongside Yamato, the hero. Coincidentally, Brogstone had read the book about the legend, and it was the very man he was talking to who wrote it. It was meant to be a book about accounts of what he lived, but no one ever believed his stories. Brogstone talks about his dream of fighting someone on equal terms. The man, on the other hand, wants to defeat Kaiser. The two united their dreams, and thus the Orichalcum Fist group was born. They attracted powerful people with power equal to his, and he developed a way to teach people to fight like the orc and like him without dying in the process. After listening to this story, Rick raises his thumb, the orc sign. Everyone is speechless. Brogstone smiles and also raises his. Then the two start fighting like a bunch of wild animals. It's an endless brawl. One throws a more deadly punch than the other. Things get so tight that Myzete sees that it's time for the audience to die too, because soon the arena won't be standing anymore. That's when he performs a high-level divine magic, magically transporting everyone out of the stadium. And then more punches to the face. They continue non-stop, until Brogstone delivers a definitive punch to Rick, who, after hitting the arena walls, is shattered. The guy can't take it anymore. He can still move his little finger. Angelica thinks it's over there, but Rionette says he can still take more. Out of nowhere, the guy invokes a very crazy red magic that energizes his body. It's Rick's innate ability manifesting. You know, the condition under which his innate ability appears. Well, the ability called Reckless Soul appears at moments when he surpasses his limits and fights someone much stronger than him. And here comes Rick with everything, an example of resilience. It's punch here, punch there. And now with this new power, it seems that Brogstone for the first time is almost calling for his mother. It's a fight where the son cries and the mother doesn't see. The two beat each other so much that they end up fainting together. Waking up 3 days later, he sees that he won the tournament belt along with Brogstone because, well, it was considered a draw. An interesting thing is that Myzete and Alice had hidden Brogstone's innate ability from him, which ended up surprising the orc at the time, right? They finally managed to tie the Sovereign's gold jewel. With this, they are closer to reaching Kaiser. They place another fake jewel in place of the belt, enchanted with Alice's magic. Snape tells Kelvin that both Brogstone and Rick refused the victory in the tournament, so the champion's post went to him. And of course he is not happy with the title of champion if he wins this way. Our heroes set off on their mission. Rionette still asks Rick if they're going to the hot springs. Oh, you naughty girl. He gets embarrassed, saying that he didn't win and that it was a draw. Myzete proposes a challenge, compete in a race with Brogstone. If he wins, he goes to the hot springs with her. If he loses, he will undergo 100 times more intense training, and so ends the first season. So did you like the video? Do you want to watch more summaries like this? Then leave your like and subscribe to the channel. And take the opportunity to check out more summaries here on the channel. I guarantee you'll like it. Just click on the video that's appearing on the screen.